The first slide that's touched on is in relation to emergency calls or 999. This has been a problematic area for the force for some time, but very pleasing to see the recent improvements. So the SLA that we need to answer 999 calls in is within 10 seconds, and that's a national measure. So that's once BT have taken the initial call and they pass it to the force. It's really important to note, you can see on there, we've gone for the last 3 months now consistently above 80%. But really important context to this nationally is in January of 2023, we were 45th out of 45 forces for 999 performance. And as of May, we're now 24th, and we're strengthening and consolidating that position, which is quite right. The public should expect that we pick up the phone in a timely way, particularly in times of an emergency. But there's a context to that as well in terms of the amount of calls we're receiving. So last month, we saw an increase of 501 calls, or just over 4% against the previous month. And yet we've still held a good level of performance at this time of year against that SLA of 90%. Just a final one to note on this slide, no force nationally is achieving 90% at the moment. They're all just slightly under that. So I think that's important to note. So this slide then, it talks about crime levels. The crime pattern actually remains fairly static over recent months, but you can see the improvement from summer of last year, and a steady decline in overall reported crime, which is positive for the communities of North Yorkshire. So that's the top blue line. But the caveat to any policing organisation reporting on their crime stats is, can we trust them? Can we trust that data? And the top box demonstrates our crime data integrity, which is assessed by the Inspectorate of Constabulary. So when we were last inspected in February 19, we had a good grading for our crime data integrity, and we continue to self-test and assure that we are recording crime as it should be, so that actually what we're presenting is meaningful to the public and our own understanding, so we can tackle crime and reduce it. The bottom box is our crime rate per 1,000 population set against the England and Wales crime rate per 1,000 average, per 1,000 population average. And this is an accepted measure of benchmarking used by His Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary of Fire and Rescue Services, used by them when they come in and assess how well a force can reduce crime and keep the people safe. So you can see there on every measure, bar fraud, and that's because we record fraud slightly differently, and I think we covered that on the previous public accountability meeting.
We did.
That we fare fairly well, and we have quite a large preventative emphasis in our approach to reducing crime, which we've just had discussions around certain crime types this morning at Force Performance meeting with all the senior leaders, and that's obvious from some of the data that we've gone through. Okay, so we move on to the next graph, which ones that shows you North Yorkshire Police's performance in relation to a burglary residential. I just ask you to bear in mind the table before, which demonstrates we are roughly around just over half the national average rate of burglary residential. So we do have low levels of residential burglary in North Yorkshire, but one is too many. We know what kind of crime and the impact it can have on victims. So we work really hard at both preventing, but also at detecting this element of crime. So you can see from there, good, positive, fairly static performance around residential burglary at the moment. I just draw your attention to one element, one figure on that bottom graph, if you like, or underneath that top graph, which is 24% awaiting outcome. That covers two areas. That covers crime reports that are in our crime management unit waiting finalisation, but it also accounts for a number of investigations that remain on officer workloads being progressed. So that covers two elements to that. And what you'll also see then on the bottom graph is personal robbery. I just think it's important to go to the scale on the left of the graph and look at the numbers of crimes we're talking about month on month. So from, for example, we'll be around 7 in March, up to a higher month of 20 in May, and then around 15 in June, and that's across the force area. So it's important we do scale this in terms of our understanding. Personal robbery, again, is a key priority for our colleagues who work in localities and local CIDs, and we will continue to tackle those. But in general, set against the national picture of average crime rates and the trends that we see locally, both relatively positive and static from our perspective, even though, as I say, there's no complacency, and we've got to keep targeting offenders. We've got to do a lot of preventative work, because we'd rather prevent a victim from taking place and having to conduct an investigation.
Thanks, Scott. Now, it's a similar question in relation to the next one. You're right, the numbers are low. Of course, you've already made the point, and I'm grateful for you doing so, that in respect of what are very sort of person-centred incidents and outcomes, that one is too many for that individual member of the public, that individual victim. But we'll perhaps come to this on a future meeting. But one of the issues that I know is a consistent one in terms of customer feedback, if I could put it that way, is communication and timelines. I think members of the public understand that not every single instance of crime or disagreeable incident can be extinguished at source, and that occasionally things will take time. But we'll park that a little bit for another day, because I think it's an area that we'll need to explore probably on a deeper dive. But in general, I think the force can expect Zoe to explore that quite regularly and quite deeply in terms of the actual customer experience. It's a little bit like, none of us mind if the train is delayed, but provided somebody explains broadly why and broadly how long, and it's that sort of basic customer experience thing that we do pick up a lot of negative feedback about at the moment.
So this slide then talks about, in police parlance, section 136, mental health detentions. What we mean here, put in simple terms, is when an officer, police officer, will find somebody in public who is in immediate need of care or control because of their mental health that they may be displaying at the times, or symptoms of mental health difficulties. So this is where the police have a power to detain people in public. They don't arrest them, they detain them, so that then they can be assessed by a professional as to whether they require further help and specialist intervention through medical teams. So this is important because there's a national concordat in place that would say the police are not the people who should be transporting mental health patients unless they're violent and a high level of violence, and of course we will be expected to do that. So this slide describes how many occurrences we had force-wide in May, which was 30. It demonstrates the average time that the police spend dealing with these occurrences, and the reason for that is we will find somebody in distress or in need. We will compassionately intervene around detaining them, and then we will transport them to a mental health facility. And depending on the availability of a mental health bed or a facility that can adequately and properly accommodate them, we may be with them for some time. So that's why you look at that and think, well, that's nearly, I mean, if you add it up, it's kind of 14, 15 hours, isn't it, worth of time. Sometimes it can take that long. These people are in real need of help. But you can see from that slide that in May, 20 incidents were transported by ambulance. 3 incidents have not recorded, and I'll come on to that in a moment. And of the detentions that police officers made in public, 37% of those resulted in a formal admission into a mental health facility for further support. And that we don't work on this in terms of, we need to get to 100% on that. If someone looks as though they're in immediate care and control, we will rightly intervene, because we're not the experts. We can't determine whether someone needs further treatment or not. I referenced there 3 incidents not recorded. That's about how they're transported or not by ambulance, and that's because we rely on the information that's provided to us by health partners. So in this case, Tees and Weir Valley Foundation Trust, and using our own custody data. And you can see basically there on the bottom graph, we take very few people into police custody, it's not an appropriate place of safety for someone with mental health issues, although we obviously do get some offenders who do clearly have acute mental health problems, and then we have to investigate that criminally. But you can clearly see there's a distinct balance between those going into a health setting and those coming into police custody. So you can see the simple count by district is the top left graph. That's how many stop searches are being conducted across the force area. Very often we will use intelligence. We will be deployed to areas of risk where crime is happening. And as I've said, it is a useful and legitimate tool to be able to tackle some of the issues that communities are concerned about. The graph on the right, on the top, demonstrates the proportion by ethnicity of the people that we search, and the bottom graphs then start explaining that in more detail. So you can see the split in the bottom left-hand graph between male and female. The UNK is unknown. That's where we won't have recorded it accurately or properly on the system. Sorry, on the form itself that the officer conducts. You then get a graph on age, and the important one that we spend a tremendous amount of time scrutinising and understanding, as do the rest of UK policing, as you can imagine, is the self-defined ethnicity of the people that we search. So we understand that the Black and ethnic population in North Yorkshire about 4.2%, and you can see there that our stop search is around double that rate of that population. That disproportionality is something that we work really hard to understand, to make sure that we're legitimate, and we're legitimate in the eyes of those communities. Sorry, I think I can see Amanda's hand up, Simon.
Yes, I know Amanda was keen to explore a few things on this slide, so I'll hand over to her.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was just while you were talking through the data there, Scott. So in particular, I know members of the public are quite often interested around circumstances in which a child might be stop searched, and how officers ensure that the child is protected and supported. It's quite an increase as well since the last public meeting we had. So I was just wondering if you could maybe explore that a bit further and explain.
Yeah, so we will, the circumstances in which a child will be searched will be the similar grounds to how we search other people, in essence. I mean, this stop search is particularly around the use of what we call Section 1 stop search PACE powers. So that's where, for example, we believe somebody might have a knife, or they might have a weapon. They may have something else on them that we can search for. Drugs is another something that we may be searching for. In terms of young people, it's got to be done really sensitively. And we know that there are an awful lot of scrutiny nationally and both locally, and a lot of intrusion, quite right, by the Commissioner's Office and members of the public into how we do this appropriately. There are times when it has to be done for the safety of the individual and the safety of those around them in terms of officers, but we train officers to be respectful. They need to understand the proportionality of what they're doing. The majority of the interactions will be caught on body-worn video, and should be, rightly, so that we can demonstrate complete transparency about how it's done. And then the grounds for searching people, and particularly children, and including children, then will be recorded formally. Supervisory oversight should be applied, and we know that in our case it's not always, and that's an issue that we're picking up as well internally. So there's an awful lot of scrutiny in this area, but the majority of particularly searching younger people will be on the basis of keeping them and the wider public safe.
But essentially what we're looking at here, and I go back to what we were talking about of how members of the public keep themselves safe, you know, the most basic things to do is to ensure you have strong passwords. Don't use the same passwords for all your accounts, have different ones for everyone. Ensure you're using some kind of like safe storage to manage your passwords. We recommend password management software, although equally certainly on iPhones and things of that nature, it has got built-in password management software in there that is secure, that will encrypt your passwords in there and keep them safe. And these are the best ways to keep yourself online. And as we've touched on already in this discussion, not everybody does things in the same way. Not everybody's got that same technical knowledge and competence. Look, if people have to write stuff down in a book and lock that in a safe somewhere, then that's a safe way of doing it. What isn't a safe way is having the same password for every single account you have online, for your email address, for your banking, because if once one goes, these hackers will get into every single account. And the main attack vector that we see for people's accounts getting hacked is phishing emails. Every single time, be that a member of the public or a business, it's responding to a phishing email. It's clicking on a link. It's filling out that information. This is how some of your data is getting compromised. There are other ways your data gets compromised, and we will advise members of the public on how they can check if their email address has been previously subject of a data breach. So, for example, if a business has been subject of a cyber attack and all their data was stolen, so there are a number of companies out there that have been subject to this, they may have taken your name, address, bank details, telephone number, and unfortunately your password as well. That is publicly available, and we highlight to the public if that information is there, and of course tell them to change their details as soon as possible. So just in respect of this, I would encourage any businesses or community groups to contact the Cybercrime unit if they would like a presentation or escape room or any of our training resources, and we'll definitely look to do that for them.
So the key updates, if I can, very, very quickly, is the cause of concern. So colleagues and the public may remember we received a HMI report on the 17th of March. Within the report, there was an area where we got inadequate, which was question what they describe as our strategic and workforce planning linked to our corporate services. And as a result of receiving that, there was a cause of concern. The cause of concern gave us 3 months to address the matters that they have raised with us in relation to our corporate services to improve the delivery of operational policing and service to victims and public. Them letters were fully evidenced and submitted to HMI within the timescale as agreed with HMI. There was over 100 separate pieces of evidence uploaded to the HMICFRS huddle, as they describe it. And then we had interviews on the 13th of July last week, and again on Monday this week with the SROs and heads of function. So those SROs were the interim assistant chief officer and myself, who covered off question 10 and question 9, which is about strategic planning and workforce, with the head of our people services, head of our finance, which has taken place, and there's a interview still to take place with head of our training, which is going to take place closer to August in agreement with HMI. As a result of them interviews and all the evidence we submitted, the initial feedback is very positive in terms of the progress we've made. It's too early to say anything formally in terms of where we are with regards to it, but certainly HMI see the initial feedback, very impressed with the level of change and progress, importantly, for victims and the public the force has made by addressing the cause of concern issues which link to the corporate services delivery of operational policing and service to the public. In addition to that, we've had the HMIC in last week to looking at what they call question 7 of appeal assessment framework. Question 7 relates to the management of serious and violent sexual offenders in particular. And the initial feedback again in relation to that question is positive, although we've got to have the formal response back from HMI. We've had an initial debrief and there was nothing startling raised of concern with regards to that. But again, it's too early to say as to what that will follow up into. In addition to that, we've got all the preparation in line for a follow-up inspection to see what progress North Yorkshire Police has made on behalf of the public in September and October. So moving on to the next slide. This is the improvement plan that we put into place following the HMI inspection. This improvement plan was put in place following the debrief in November 2022. Everything is on track, bar what you can see, what is within Enable, which is around the leadership strategy and plan. That's missed. The reason it's showing as red, it missed the deadline with regards to completion of a strategy. We have got a draft strategy, we have got a draft plan. It was out for consultation and feedback, and because of the amount of feedback it's received, we've asked for that to be given an extension to give it the due regard, really, and the time and effort it deserves in order to finalise. HMI are aware of that. There were no issues raised by HMIC. The key thing that HMICFRS were concerned about was a workforce strategy, which we have and we are effectively using, a recruitment plan, which we have and we are effectively using, and a very clear understanding of what our needs are as an organisation with regards to recruitment, retention, progression, retirements for 22-23, 23-24 and beyond, which we will be able to evidence and provide. There's nothing further I'll go through in relation to the improvement plan. The only thing that you can see on amber there is the reduction in the backlog for CROMU, which is the Crime Records Occurrence Management Unit, which is the finalisation items that ACC Bissett spoke about. That's amber because we've missed our own deadline. We would like to have that to have been in the 500s by now. We know the reasons why. Scott has talked through that and what the plans are in relation to it, but huge amount of progress in relation to reducing from 80% since November last year, an overall reduction of about 80%. The only other thing I'd like to mention, which is on the following slides, but we won't go to the slides as such, is the digital forensic unit backlog. So that was a key concern in terms of the amount of items we had that hadn't been examined and the impact that was going to have to victims. We've reduced our digital forensics unit backlog, some really amazing work by all the staff that are working within that department, by 69%. And we have a new service level agreement in the organisation that most items will be returned to the investigator within 72 hours. The reason I say most items, because there's always the occasional device that needs to take longer to break into to get extract the information, or there's multiple pieces of information on a computer as such, which may take longer. But overall, really good progress. We're not sitting on our laurels. There's still much more for us to do, not only in preparation for the inspection, but as you can see from the performance slides that Scott already has presented on, there's much more for us to do as an organisation to get to the service levels and the outstanding gradings that we want to achieve in the future.
Let's start with Mr. W, who asks an important question about NYP support for road traffic arrangements in connection with Remembrance Day. I won't read the question verbatim, but I know you've had a chance, Mabs and Scott, to think about those questions in advance. Could I bring one or both of you in, please, to address Mr. W's concern? Yeah,
I'll pick up that, Simon, if that's okay. I think firstly start by saying understand how emotive this issue can be for obvious reasons, and we do have a large military and ex-military community within the county, and we know that. But if I just explain as to why we are where we are. For many years, the police service has provided a traffic management function for a wide range of public events. The Traffic Management Act 2004 then placed a duty on local traffic authorities, essentially local authorities, to manage traffic associated with planned events like sporting events, carnivals and parades. Although it was enacted in 2004, a lot of forces persisted with the same practices they had done before till about 2008. But a number of forces did adjust the position over that period, and it was very much left to local forces at that time. Whilst large remembrance events in the force area have utilised traffic management companies, North Yorkshire Police have continued to undertake those duties at the majority of smaller scale remembrance events. And important to note, in 2022, North Yorkshire Police supported 32 events with traffic management. Other police forces have now ceased providing traffic management for all events, including Remembrance Day. However, North Yorkshire Police have continued to provide this support, like I've just outlined. And our position, therefore, locally has diverged from elsewhere. There is a key legal position here that the police don't actually have the power to close roads unless it's an emergency. We don't have that legal route available to us to do it. The national direction from National Police Council, College of Policing, which is our professional body, is that policing should not take responsibility for closing roads or managing traffic other than in those emergencies. This is referred to in NPCC guidance on event policing and policing events in our command training. Both affirm that the responsibility events on roads lies with the Highways Authority, essentially the local authority, in conjunction with the event organiser. North Yorkshire Police will be amending our approach to ensure we comply with that NPCC advice and the College of Policing guidance and our current legal advice, as I've just outlined. We will therefore not be undertaking routine traffic management for any remembrance events in 2023. We may, of course, still sometimes need to undertake or supplement road closures with police resources where this is necessary around our core responsibilities. And an example of that might be counter-terrorism. North Yorkshire will continue to be part of ceremonial events through our neighbourhood policing teams, senior officers and local staff. And we would never come away from that commitment to be being visible, recognising the sacrifice of the military and the contribution of our communities.
This question is a long one, but it essentially relates to the force's plans and techniques to tackle shoplifting and shop-related theft. So again, in the interest of brevity, I won't read the question. Scott, am I back with you to address this question?
Yeah, I'll pick up all these, Simon, just to make it easier. So I think it's first highlighting what our process is, and I'll do this very short in short time. So we had a revised retail crime process which was launched in February 2022. The new procedure is designed to be smoother and more convenient for retailers, and will reduce demands on our appointment system, which we've now introduced. But the process will not apply when there are any aggravating factors. So, for example, I can see the question poses a question around where violence is used or threats are used or damage is caused. We would grade that appropriately, whether it's a shoplifting or not, and we would attend either immediately or within the hour, depending on the circumstances of the incident. So it's important when people report it to us, if it's ongoing at the time, it's a crime in progress, and we will go. And our demand and crime incident grading policy clearly states that. Where it's not, then obviously we will consider dealing with it in a different way. The benefit of not tying retailers to appointment time was actually based on feedback we got about we would rather not be tied to a time, and we want to submit the evidence in our own time. The issue is for us, and it's a key point of improvement, is we need an effective system for people to be able to do that. And we're already working on two systems, actually, one called NICE and one called GoodSam, which enables very easy submission of digital evidence, whether that be CCTV or something of that nature, through our system, so we can capture it and then we can start the investigation.
So two intertwined questions from Mr. C, both of them relating to safeguarding and vulnerability, and how North Yorkshire Police is, I was going to say performing, but making arrangements to address not only some of the issues that we've the Inspectorate have highlighted, but more broadly to meet public expectation in this space. So I know I'm back with you, Scott, so over to you, please, to address this topic.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. So I am, just to go back, I'm ACC Local Policing and Safeguarding, so this all sits in my area of responsibility across the force. I think the force are very candid, as was the Commissioner, about our need to improve protecting vulnerable people. That was recognised last autumn. It'd actually been recognised before that, but Peel picked up on that. You'll be aware of the National Child Protection Inspections, basically the two inspections and the re-inspection, and then some of the issues that fell out of that. Pleasingly, if I could start at the beginning, we've just in the process of publishing our new force management statement, which has clearly done an assessment of the demand in this area, particularly around child abuse, adult abuse, domestic violence, mental health. And there are clearly some improvements that we must deliver. So, as you would expect, we've got robust plans in place to deliver an uplift in investigations. So if I could take two sections of that first. So we have a central safeguarding command that basically includes a lot of the specialist safeguarding elements. It might help the questioner if they wanted to revisit the online public meeting of the 3rd of May, because on there we covered in a lot of detail. I know we haven't got time now. We covered in a lot of detail what those specialist safeguarding uplifts look like including putting a slide on the presentation about the roles, the nature of the roles, and the uplift that we're putting in there. So maybe that would help the questioner get a lot of level of detail.
So Mr. T asks a question in relation to corruption and how the force combats and protects and prevents in relation to that. So over to North Yorkshire Police on this topic, please.
Yes, I can quickly pick that up. I'm the appropriate authority for North Yorkshire Police as the lead for professional standards, as the Deputy Chief Constable and for ethics. Professional standards departments have been follow national guidance, not only from the College of Policing, but from the National Police Chiefs Council. They operate in a very similar way against a code of practice, which is set against police officer and police staff regulations and code of conduct. That's overseen by the IOPC where appropriate, where it's either an investigation led by the IOPC or it's an investigation which is managed by the IOPC but locally led. We're confident in terms of how our investigations are conducted. I only yesterday a performance meeting with the Professional Standards Department themselves, going through the number of investigations they have, the number of officers that we have currently suspended across the force, number of staff we have currently suspended, or those who have been served notices and are undergoing an investigation. The issue of impartiality is an important one, but I am confident in terms of where there is an issue of an officer's familiarisation with either a complainant or somebody who may be subject of an investigation, that's appropriately flagged and recorded, and either we look at somebody else within the department to investigate, and if it's a senior officer, depending on the requirement for the impartiality, we have even gone either outside of the force for either a peer review of that investigation or the investigation to be conducted by another force area.
Mabs, thank you for that, and again, it's an opportunity for me to just make a point on behalf of the Commissioner's Office, and that is to say that we are one of only, I think, still 2 areas who operate the fullest extent of the government's complaints reform models, and that means that every complaint initially is handled and processed by the Commissioner's team. We are entirely independent in the way that we operate, and the staff that deal with those cases don't have a policing background. They have other professional backgrounds with a particular specialism in customer service, and that mixture of skills and experience combined with colleagues in PSD who deal, of course, as you've explained, Mabs, with the most serious of cases, means that we're able to offer a very rounded service to the public in that respect. And whilst I won't dwell on the sort of performance side of things, we have a very significant track record of identifying solutions to cases where there are public concerns, and to do so quickly and effectively with high levels of satisfaction. But that point around independence is one that's well worth us making, because we do operate very differently in North Yorkshire to most other areas in that respect. There's been some recent controversy in relation to the length of time that police forces retain published details of misconduct outcomes on the force's websites. Mabs, could you explain, please, how long North Yorkshire Police retain those published details, and assist us, please, with signposting to the relevant policy material for members of the public around that to reassure them?
I don't have that information to hand, Simon, but I can get that to your office, and also the links to actually how to obtain the information.
Thank you. Grateful for that. And then there was another matter, which again, because it's topical, I'll raise it. You may or may not have the information at your fingertips. There was an issue in the broadsheet media recently highlighted in relation to an aspect of the Metropolitan Police website, and I think other police force websites, harvesting data via a tracking tool and making that data available to Facebook. I understand that isn't the case in North Yorkshire Police, but I'll raise it in public and just ask whether you're in a position to confirm that, or whether perhaps there's again anything for us to explore in relation to that in more detail.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. I'm aware of the issue that's been raised in relation to the Metropolitan Police. Clearly, they have a slightly different position on it to what has been reported. In relation to North Yorkshire Police and ourselves, it's not anything that I have been made aware of as the CIRO for the force. So I'm the Senior Information Responsible Officer, which is a legal duty that I have on behalf of the Chief Constable. And it's not one that's been flagged to us that we've done anything which would breach our responsibilities under the Data Protection Act or with the Information Commissioner's Office.